So again, today is all about yoga. I saw Charlie just showed up. He's a yoga fanatic, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, we have Catherine Justice, which is a fabulous name, by the way, Justice, talking about that today. So it should be tons of fun. And she comes by way of our friends at Hennepin. So we're pretty happy to have her.
So I know we've talked about this several times and keep reminding everyone, but the platform for Echo login is going to be changing December 6th. The old link will not work, so please scan the QR code if you haven't done so already and make an account. Yeah. Katie will also share the link at the end.
And remember, if you try and register and get on our Echo without this, you'll probably see I don't know, it could be reruns of Mythbusters that you'll log into and not us. So get that done.
You'll see.
So next slide. So we have a lot of things coming up. We're looking at Cameron Weaver coming next week again from Hennepin. So good talk. He's always a very interesting talk. Next week, we'll have to see because we have some other things that are kind of going. I may be doing the benzodiazepines and alcohol and pregnancy, but we may have some other stuff. So lots of good talks coming up. And please feel free to check all of these out. Remember, around the holidays, we will have a couple spots where we don't have anything. So
just a reminder, Hennepin Healthcare, along with the other partners listed at the bottom of the screen, are going to be hosting a joint perinatal improvement summit. And this is only going to be taking place on November 16th. They just shifted it to one day. So if you have interest, scan the QR link. I think it's going to be pretty good. Both Kurt and I will be speaking at that with a lot of other great speakers.
That's going to make it great. I actually just checked and there's 161 people signed up for that. So it's a beautiful crowd. So lots of fun. Remember, there's free CME. We love people. Your beaming face today. Feel free to do that. Everybody knows how to get the CME, but if you have any questions, talk with Katie. She'll fix you.
We don't care if you're eating lunch.
Yeah, eat lunch. We don't care.
If you have any technical assistance needs, feel free to contact us and we will try and guide and support you.
Maybe.
So reassuring.
Yeah, we might be able to help. And again, the Center for Opioid Resources, that's the core site, has all of the things you might need, different forms, protocols, all kinds of stuff. Feel free to log into that through Stratus Health. And with that, we are going to turn it over to Catherine Justice, and she's going to tell us why we should be doing yoga. I'm pretty sure. I'll probably convert my whole life and start doing more yoga once this talk is over. So go ahead, Catherine. If you want to just introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody kind of what you do in real life here.
Sure. And is it okay if I screen share?
Absolutely.
Okay. Up here. Okay, can you see?
Yep.
You're not in presenter mode though.
There we go. Ooh, a cat.
I skipped to the end. Yeah. Okay, you guys are getting spoilers that there's a lot of cat pictures on here. So you're welcome.
I just got new kittens yesterday, so I'm.
So thank you for inviting me to come talk about yoga, which is sort of my paradigm that I view all healthcare through the lens of yoga. And I always think it's a little helpful when anyone is giving a speech to know a little bit about the person giving it and their perspective. So a tiny bit about me and my background. I started my professional career working in the theater arts. And it was through that work and kind of dance work that led me into the world of yoga. And the world of yoga then led me into this idea of healing, which brought me to physical therapy school. But because I went to physical therapy school with this yoga perspective, I soon found myself professionally in the integrative health family and ended up doing a 2-year fellowship in integrative medicine a few years ago that sort of broadened the scope of the work that I do. And so now I'm the program manager for integrative health here at Hennepin Healthcare. And I still am also an integrative physical therapist, part of that program. And throughout all of the work that I do, I have it's very important to me that social justice be a part of all of my professional work. And Sorry, I've got a really crabby cat who, anytime there's a Zoom happening, she is like angry if she can't be a part of it. So this is Lotus. She's here presenting too. So you'll see threads of that social justice lens and that component running through the presentation. And this picture of me wearing a T-shirt from a quote from Dr. Joy Lewis, who is a local Minneapolis St. Paul activist and author and healer. And I just love the sentiment there of may the revolution be healing. To me, that just really encompasses a lot of what I want to do on this earth. But what I want to do for the next 30 minutes is talk to you guys about yoga and substance use disorders and yoga and addiction. So these are our objectives, is to understand some of the basic principles and practices around what yoga is, looking at it within a social justice framework and how it relates to this kind of whole person perspective of people with substance use disorder, looking critically at some of the research and the literature around yoga for substance use, and then applying that to clinical practice. So in one slide, what is yoga? Well, here we go. This is my synthesis of it. And who knows, Kurt, maybe after a little of this, you might feel like yoga is a little more than just like getting into a hot room and stretching your body. So you might find other aspects of yoga might be more appealing to you. But yoga comes from India, and it's more than 5,000-year-old spiritual tradition. So that's sort of culturally where yoga came from. And the practice of yoga does involve physical postures, which is what most people think of bending and stretching our bodies. But really the foundation of yoga practice is in these lifestyle tenets of nonviolence and truthfulness. So in Sanskrit, that's ahimsa and satya are the words for nonviolence and truthfulness. And so if those two components are not present, I don't care what your body looks like, you're not doing yoga. They need to be kind of at the forefront. And the best story I've heard about these tenets, I don't know if this is true or not, but I like it, so I hope it's true, is that someone once told me that Gandhi wrote that when he first encountered yoga, he was just overwhelmed by the philosophy of the practice and how big it was, how powerful it was. And he was too overwhelmed. He didn't know how to do it. So he said, I'm just going to pick these two foundational principles of nonviolence and truthfulness, and I'm going to live my whole life around them. And he liberated India, or he was part of the movement that liberated India. So like these are they might seem like small ideas, but they are actually quite big ideas. But then, of course, with yoga comes posture and breath work, and meditation is also a part of yoga practice. So it ends up having sort of these effects on all these different interconnected systems of the body. So we look at improving flexibility and strength and improving our quality of rest and sleep, a relaxation effect on our mind and our nervous system, creating mindfulness and creating the environment for healing, and particularly healing from trauma, as well as from physical injury. And spiritually, yoga did start within the Hindu religious tradition, but very quickly, yoga became something more than just a part of Hinduism. Buddhism kind of took yoga to be a part of their paradigm. And what we found is that because the principles of yoga, nonviolence and truthfulness, are pretty generic for almost every major religion on the planet, that yoga in and of itself is not a religion, but it is an avenue for people to explore their spirituality and their sense of meaning and purpose in their lives, of connecting to their deepest values, connecting to themselves and to something greater than themselves. And that's where it brings into that community aspect of yoga, of that oftentimes yoga is something that we do in community with other people. And the deeper you go in the practice of yoga, the more you potentially could be exploring, particularly in the meditation aspects of yoga, this idea that they call non-dualism. So the idea of separating this idea of that you and I are different, but finding more interconnection to other people and to the planet and to the world that we live in. And I love this book, Skill in Action by Michelle Cassandra Johnson. So I just wanted to read this quote because I think it's worth hearing as well as seeing. So her book is called Skill in Action, which is one other definition of the word yoga. Yoga, the traditional definition is yoga means union, it means bringing together. But in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the historical texts that yoga has been studied from, they define yoga as skill in action. So she says, one must be connected with their breath to feel their body. A connection with the body allows one to feel their heart. A connection with the heart allows one to become clear about their values so that they may connect with their humanity. When one sees their own humanity and realizes that others are suffering around them, they have the opportunity to connect with the oneness of all beings and our shared humanity. From the breath, the body, heart, and awareness of humanity, one must take action. No one can exist without taking action. Skill in action. And that kind of brings us into this holistic framework around what yoga is and how it can be useful for healing. So we've got physical health, we've got nervous system regulation, we've got social justice, social engagement, spiritual well-being, mindfulness, and mental and emotional health. And I wish that there was I had done a better job in my PowerPoint. I don't like that I put these in boxes like they're separate things. I wish I could have been better at layout and put them in bubbles or some sort of watercolor to show that they're not actually separate, that they're all interconnected. They're all aspects of the whole of human experience. So when we come into the nitty-gritty of how yoga can be used for addiction care, it becomes this idea of a sort of holistic approach for this whole person problem, knowing that addiction is really something that affects so much more than our physical body, and so much more than even our just mental health, that it's a whole person problem. It's a whole, not even whole person, I would say it's a whole community problem, because it really doesn't exist in isolation within any one person. But the major mechanisms that have been looked at for how yoga can be helpful are, the major one is stress reduction. So anyone who knows anything about addiction knows that it's incredibly stressful. So any modality that can help reduce that stress is going to help enhance recovery. An increase in mindfulness, self-regulation, empowerment. It can help to manage or mitigate some of the withdrawal symptoms, improving emotional health, psychological well-being. And then again, coming into that idea of spiritual connection, of reestablishing trust in ourselves and our bodies, reestablishing a sense of hope and meaning and purpose. And that could potentially lead to, again, that idea of a worldview transformation where people feel more connected to the planet and to each other. So now we're going to delve in. You can tell this cat is a good researcher because they've got glasses and a book. So you know that something's going on there. So we're going to get into the research now, looking at a few review articles, some trials, and some qualitative research. And so there hasn't been, I would not say that we're at the point of evidence with yoga for addiction where we have really clear guidelines. We do not have clear guidelines. So right now, a lot of these reviews we'll see are narrative reviews. So not as many systematic reviews. And I couldn't find any meta-analysis looking at yoga for addiction. But the first one I wanted to highlight is a narrative review by SOAR et al. From 2017. And they really focused in this narrative review on just the possible mechanism of stress reduction as enhancing recovery, and looked at particular implications for clinical practice, mostly using yoga as an adjunctive treatment in addition to conventional treatment. And they found good support for it being both community-based and in outpatient treatment facilities, and really looked at two time periods as the time periods most studied for yoga with addiction, which would be at the time of cessation of substance use, that there's some studies there looking at yoga, and then for preventing relapse, so kind of further down the road in the recovery process. In the next narrative review by Kapuli et al. From 2018, their review was a little bit closer to a systematic review that they looked at 16 studies, 12 of which were randomized controlled trials, ranging from nicotine use, alcohol use, opioid, and cocaine use disorders. And what they found is really common in yoga research in general, which was that the interventions were really very diverse. So some of them had a 1-week intervention and others had up to 8 weeks. Some of them were just looking at the breathing practices when it comes to yoga, really focusing on that, particularly with nicotine withdrawal. And then some others had more postures and meditation and different styles of yoga being used. So again, it's hard to have any clear guidelines when all of the research is so heterogeneous and so diverse. And a lot of self-reported measures too. So that's, again, some of these grains of salt that it's good to keep in mind when looking at the research. The Lutz et al. Focused on, again, yoga as an adjunct treatment. And what they found was that primary treatment, we don't have great outcomes. It's not recommended that someone use yoga as their primary treatment for addiction recovery. That really the evidence does not support that. It supports, all the support is for it as an adjunctive treatment. Then we've got the young adults study with Park et al., which what they mostly found was that there's not enough evidence about the use of yoga with young adults. But they set up a framework that I thought was really powerful in this piece of thinking that yoga can be helpful for emotional regulation and self-reflection and coping with stress, cognitive reframing, and mindfulness, and that these are all aspects of yoga that can be useful in addiction recovery. And then this last review is the one that I'm most connected to, and maybe this is and it's not exactly a disclosure, but I'm the associate editor for the journal that published this article. So I read a lot of the drafts of it, and so I feel extra proud of it. I think it's a fantastic article, and it's the only systematic review that I could find on yoga for substance use. And this one focused on women. They looked at 10 randomized controlled trials, and they found a lot of the same heterogeneity of studies of different times of how long the yoga lasted, different styles of yoga, different practices. They found that more gender-specific research was needed to draw conclusions for women. But I think particularly one of the reasons they were focusing on women was because in America, yoga, as you were maybe noting at the start, there's not as many men that practice yoga in America. In India, it's different, but in America, it's more women that are practicing. So the question that these researchers were looking at is, for women, would this be a particularly helpful treatment modality in America? And then when we look at some of the specific clinical trials, we can kind of zoom in a little bit more into what the therapeutic, what it can look like to create a therapeutic yoga program for addiction care. So Wimberly et al. Did a randomized trial of yoga for stress and substance use among people living with HIV who were re-entering from jail or prison into the community. And they found that RCT had 73 people, and they found decreased stress and decreased substance use in the yoga group. The other group was just a treatment as usual group with 12 sessions of an hour and a half of a weekly yoga class. And what I enjoy about this study is that they really, when they said a yoga class, they included philosophy, breathing exercises, postures, and meditation. So they used the full program of yoga, which you don't always see in research. The Mel Madrana et al. Study from 2016 focused on incorporating yoga into a group medical visit model, which is something I'm particularly interested in because we have a really great group medical visit program here at Hennepin. And this is part of what I do as my job, is bring yoga into these group medical visits, particularly for people with chronic pain, which is what this visit was for. And they did a case control study. So they matched the people in the groups with a control population outside. So it was a matched control with an N of 84. So a good size number of people were part of this study. And what they found was in the group of people who did the yoga in the group medical visit, that no one increased their dose of opioids. 17 people reduced their dose, and 7 stopped opioids altogether. And when they looked at the matched controls, nobody reduced their opioid use in the matched controls. And in fact, almost half of the people increased their dose over the 2 years. So now yoga wasn't the only intervention. There was a lot of other aspects to this group medical visit, but it still, I think, is really very compelling evidence that something was going on that was right in that group. Brock et al. Had the Breathe Easy trial, particularly looking at yoga for women and helping them stop smoking, which what they found was that the yoga participants, again, this one had an N of 227, so a lot of people. And the yoga participants had a 37% greater odds of achieving abstinence. And for each yoga class attended, it increased the quitting odds by 12%. And then Ubalacker et al. Did a pilot study in 2019 focusing on chronic pain for people receiving opioids, which, again, there's more and more research is coming out around this, looking at sort of the upstream causes of opioid use disorder, that oftentimes people are prescribed opioids for pain. So if we can get upstream of that and find better resources for managing pain that don't involve opioids, we could eliminate addiction before it even becomes a problem. And in Ubelacher et al.'s study, what they found was that the yoga program was very feasible, and participant mood tended to improve from pre to post class. So people felt better after taking them. And they found decreases in anxiety and pain for those in the yoga group. And so this is great for kind of the numbers side of things, but I do think that the qualitative studies really carry the heart of where how yoga can be helpful. So I just wanted to highlight a few quotes from this article, which is part of the first trial that I mentioned in the clinical trials of this, looking at yoga for people with substance use who were HIV positive, who were in the process of reentry into the community after being in jail or prison. And so this first quote, they classified under sort of the stress reducing effects of yoga. So one of the participants stated, by the time you finish with yoga class, you don't want drugs. It's like, okay, everything's okay. It definitely helps reduce my substance use because, first of all, it gets your mind off the particular usage. You know what I mean? It relaxes your body. So you don't think about it no more. You're like, man, I feel so good and energized. This next quote, they classified it in self-confidence and stress coping. This participant said, yoga made you feel inside yourself. Nobody else don't have to tell you. It gives you that self-worth, that pride. And then this last quote I wanted to highlight is someone talking about the social support that they received in the yoga. They said, like I was in a class of people that they didn't judge me, wasn't mean to me, wasn't angry at me. They were all smiling, laughing, and giggling. I made them laugh. They made me laugh. That's very rare. And I don't have one person that just got to be the one to get my, and that's very rare. And I don't have not one person that just got to be the one to get on my damn nerves. So before we do a little mini practice, I did also want to talk about one aspect of yoga that I specialize in, which is trauma sensitive yoga. So focusing not just on the yoga practice being delivered, but tailoring it to people who have experienced trauma. So it's using trauma theory and attachment theory and neuroscience within the yoga framework. And within trauma sensitive yoga, the focus is on empowerment and agency, giving people the power to kind of decide how to practice within their own bodies. By doing that, we use invitational language, which you're going to see in a minute when we do a little practice together, very brief mini practice. Kurt, you are required to join in. Knowing that in trauma sensitive yoga, everyone's practice might look different. So it's, again, not the same as like a group class where everyone does the same thing. In trauma sensitive yoga, it's encouraged that everybody tailor their practice to themselves. There's no hands-on adjusting in general in trauma sensitive yoga. You're not going to touch each other. And offering up options for all practices, again, to kind of enhance that empowerment, let people choose how they want to practice. And creating safety and encouraging interoception, which is our body's ability to sense its internal state and to regulate its internal state. So knowing how your stress response is being activated and then having tools to either bring it up or down depending on the needs of the circumstances. So for anyone who would like to do this with me, really brief, it's going to be just like 1 minute, 2 minutes max. But if you'd like, you are welcome to start off by what we call grounding yourself. So this is literally feeling the ground under your body. So feet, legs, back, arms, wherever you have support, whether it's the floor, chair. I just invite you now to just notice that contact. You don't have to do anything special. Just notice how you contact the earth. And this could be your yoga practice. You could just hang out right here in this grounding space. That would be amazing. And if you'd like, within that feeling of grounding, of connecting to the earth, you could allow a softening to occur. Maybe letting your body drop or let go into that surface. And you might notice that this is already starting to happen in your body, that your breath might start to just naturally slow down or deepen. And if you'd like, you could even place one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest to just notice how your body moves as you breathe. As you breathe in, you might feel something inside you expand. As you breathe out, you might feel a softening. And you could stay just with this, or if you wanted, you could invite your breath to drop maybe a little deeper, meaning a little more in your belly, a little less in your chest. We know that our autonomic nervous system, our stress response, is really closely linked to our breath. And when we allow our breath to drop down a little more into our belly, so that when we breathe in, the belly expands. When we breathe out, the belly softens back in. When we engage in that breathing practice, it's like a little direct link into our stress response, helping to create more safety in our body, dialing back that fight or flight. And again, you could stay just right here. This is an amazing yoga practice, just like this. Or if you'd like, you could add in some movement in the body that might help you feel that breathing practice a little stronger. I don't have the best camera view for this, but can do our best to feel it in our bodies. But if you'd like, we could just very gently start to move our spines a little bit. So this could look like, as you breathe out, you could exhale and let your body round. Maybe your head drops down. And as you breathe in, the opposite could occur, where you lift up and you feel your back maybe arch and open a little bit. And this movement could be teeny tiny. It could be so small that it's just your eye gaze looking down as you exhale, looking up as you inhale. Or the movement practice could be really big. You could make really big. We call this a cat stretch when we round forward. Like you could imagine you've got cat claws reaching forward. We call it cow pose when you lift upwards, kind of like the sway back of a cow. So this movement could be any size, any speed. And perhaps just noticing the physical sensations present with the movement. You might notice some sensation in the back. You might notice different changes in your breath. And you can stay with this if this is feeling good in your body. Feel free to stay with it. Or if you'd like, you always end yoga practice with some form of relaxation. And so if you want this relaxation, could just be, again, that sort of softening and grounding. Maybe you lean back in your chair a little bit now. Maybe you close your eyes, or they could stay open. But perhaps once again, noticing the ground underneath you. And if you'd like, invite your body to soften and melt into the earth. Perhaps noticing the sensations of your body breathing. And perhaps noticing too, if your mind starts to run away with thoughts of the past or the future, you can always reground, come back to that state of mindfulness by just noticing your breath or noticing your contact with the floor. Both of those things are always going to be present. Sometimes we call them an anchor for mindfulness that can bring our attention back to the present moment. We can anchor it in the breath, anchor it in the ground. And you can feel free to stay in this relaxation practice as long as you want. If you feel ready to open your eyes if they were closed, just the last little bits of my PowerPoint. But if you want, like whatever sensations that practice stirred up in you, we don't have to contain it. We can allow those sensations to just kind of still be present inside our bodies, inside our nervous system, so that our yoga practice isn't something that we just do on the mat and then let go. But maybe we can kind of continue it even while talking to each other, even while listening. Which brings us into this space of like, well, now we know a little bit about the research around yoga. We know a little bit about yoga and how it can be used for addiction care. But what we don't know is what style of yoga is best. We don't know. There's so many different styles, so many different traditions. What dose? Like, again, these studies looked at brief as one single session to like 5 days a week for 12 weeks. Like it's really varied of how much. Or even the delivery model, should it be online? Could it be in person? So there's a lot of questions here, a lot that we don't know. But I do like to tell people that, even within the Western scientific method, it doesn't say that things aren't true just because we don't know them. It just says this is not known yet. So it doesn't mean that there's no effective dose or that there's no effective delivery model. What it probably means is there's a lot of different effective doses and delivery models and a lot of different effective styles of yoga. One thing that I do like to mention the difference between, which is a yoga teacher certification, which is an RYT. Generally, that is a standard in America for any yoga teacher that is going to be a part that's going to be teaching a class. It's a 200-hour level training. And a CIYT is a certified yoga therapist with the International Association of Yoga Therapy. CIYTs require at least 1,000 hours. So it's from 200 hours to 1,000. And so when looking at yoga for addiction, you just want to know a little bit about the instructors and about their experience levels, is always important to think about. What I love, though, about this idea of using yoga for addiction is that we're really entering into the space of these more embodied ways of knowing, these more physical, like that sort of that feeling of being in your body in the moment as a mechanism of healing and recovery. And I think it's a really powerful one of getting people to trust their body again. And I wanted to highlight one more quote from the Wimberley qualitative study when looking at some of the barriers to yoga practice and why it isn't used more widely. So this is one of the barriers that was described. They said, I would not have been able to do yoga in the community class because it was nothing but skinny white women and some men, but they were all like of a certain class. You know what I mean? I don't think I would have been comfortable there. I mean, they would have pretended like I was welcome, but it wasn't like this one. And so that really speaks to the importance of decolonizing yoga practice in America and of inviting more different colors and genders into the yoga space than not just skinny white women. More different diversity of body sizes is important too. And that's why I used pictures of cats throughout the PowerPoint. One, because that's one way of showing that I'm not going to put a bunch of pictures of white women throughout my yoga practice. But I was like, you know what, this slide, I think it's important for visibility purposes to have some non-skinny white women doing yoga to show that it is something that can be really powerful for all people, for all bodies. And that it's a social justice goal of mine to kind of shatter this false belief that yoga is just for skinny, rich white women. And on that note, now that I might have stirred some people up, I'm open to any questions that people have. Excited to answer and discuss if anyone has.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to start it off here and ask, how many cats do you have? Do you have a cat of your own? And what does he look like?
Well, actually, I have two. And one of them, this is not a picture of her, but this looks a lot like Lotus, like one of my cats. Yes. So I have two, but I would have like 20 if I could get away with it. I would be the person.
That was awesome.
When we look at this, and it's funny because I've had some patients who've been in programs where they've actually done yoga and have commented on that. And if you think about it, I mean, they come from a life of complete chaos, right? And so this is, I think, really a nice thing for them to do. Do you think that like if they stay in that and they come out of treatment and is there a certain sense of community as well that you get from yoga, in groups that kind of helps as well?
Absolutely. And especially if people find a particular community where they can practice yoga together, it can often build a very, very strong community. Because you're vulnerable during yoga, which again might be where some of the resistance comes in for people too. When you start to slow down your nervous system and move your body in ways that maybe you haven't moved it before, there's a vulnerability, which if you're able to move with it and go there, then there's community and support that can happen alongside that vulnerability.
We did have a question in the chat from Sarah, and she asked if yoga is being implemented into programs in Minnesota for SUD.
Yes. So I know it is. The only one that I know about off the top of my head is I know that in the past, I'm not sure if it's ongoing now, but Twin City Recovery Project has had yoga as part of their program. And I don't know if someone's able to find a link to that and put it in the chat, or I can do it. But and I'm guessing that it's probably a part of other recovery programs too, but that's the only one off the top of my head that I know for sure has done yoga in the past.
My question kind of piggybacks off of that one, because I've known of jails that have brought yoga instructors in to work with the inmates, and then yoga integrated into treatment programs. But is there a Minnesota-based program that focuses on when the patient re-enters the community? Is it like any YMCA-based programs or things that are reduced costs when someone's getting back on their feet?
That's a great question, and I will look into it. And can I get back to you on it? Because I don't know of any off the top of my head, again, other than Twin Cities Recovery Project and their program, but I don't think that's specific for people in reentry. But I'm going to write this down of looking for yoga programs for reentry.
Molly had a question, and I think it's kind of a good one, because I think a lot of times at work, and I've seen different things on, if you have a stressful job and you're taking a break, doing yoga in your chair for a few minutes to kind of reset. Do you have any kind of resources for that? She's wondering if there's anything you'd have.
The YouTube is an amazing resource. You can find a lot of free yoga online. I will say, I'm like in my presenter here. I'm going to stop sharing. That'll make it easier. And I can find this now. So I like to give this disclosure that I do have a yoga YouTube channel that I receive zero financial compensation for. I set it up as a worker at Hennepin Healthcare. I started the YouTube channel because so many patients were asking me for yoga resources that were free of cost. And so I started looking at the YouTube and trying to put together a list. And then I'm a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist. And I was like, nah, I could do it better. Like I was arguing with all the YouTube. So then I started just making my own videos very informally. But I do have a chair yoga video. So I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat. But really, you can just Google chair yoga and you can find a lot of resources. Why chair yoga is so great is because, again, it's just really accessible. You don't need any equipment. You just need a chair, and a lot of different body types and abilities can practice really effectively in a chair.
I'm guessing there's cats in those videos.
There are cats that come and go throughout, and sometimes children too. So
yeah.
I do have a question about hot yoga. What is the basis of that? Is it to get toxins out of your body or get rid of fluid for weight loss? Or are there other properties that aren't really talked about with hot yoga? And are you a fan of that? Is it any better, or is it just kind of...
Well, you could probably shorten that question to say, what do you think of hot yoga?
Well, I will say that there is some research coming out particularly around depression and hot yoga as a mechanism towards healing depression, which for anyone who's done hot yoga before, you sweat a lot. And it is aerobic. So because of that, because your body is working to cool itself off, hot yoga tends to be more aerobically challenging than other forms of yoga. And so you see alongside that aerobic effort, you see a lot of the same benefits that come from the mind-body benefits that come from aerobic exercise that you can also get from hot yoga. So it's looking at, so that's where some of the theory and the research comes in as to why people often feel quite good after sweating through every layer of their clothing and pouring dripping sweat down onto a yoga mat. Like why that's pleasant, it is for a lot of people, and it isn't for others. Some people that heat just isn't a good fit for them. But again, when you look at that aerobic component to it, that's where you get the increased brain-derived neurotropic factor in the brain that helps sort of prime us for the feel-good qualities of serotonin. It helps to kind of prime us for that. It also, there isn't any research that I know of that looks at hot yoga in particular with cognition and learning, but that's the other thing that you often see with BDNF with that brain-derived neurotropic factor, and the link with aerobic exercise is very strong. So that would be something I would be curious if any researchers are looking at it, that something to kind of keep our eye on in the hot yoga research world.
If anybody else has questions, feel free to unmute. If you don't let us, I mean, we're happy to take them out of the chat, but if anybody wants to unmute, that'd be great as well.
Thank you, Kurt. And Catherine, I have a question about if you're able to share your link, your YouTube link. I don't know. Is that okay? Is that acceptable?
I put it in the chat, so I hope it's okay. Like I said, I don't have any financial gains from it. It's not a monetized channel. It's just out there free for everyone. It has ads on it because YouTube put ads on everything, but I don't get any money for the ads.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, Catherine, are you? Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I was just going to say, first of all, thank you. I have a bit of a theory that people with addictions, especially opioid use disorder, sort of become disconnected or estranged from their own body.
Yeah.
Their body does things that they don't really, they feel betrayed by their body in some ways, withdrawal, but not just withdrawal. They feel pain when there's no reason. People are like, why are you having that pain? So anyways, it seems like yoga would be a great way to reestablish a relationship and a knowledge with one's body. And so that they don't feel like, like estranged from or a passenger in their own body, but they're really more inhabiting their own body. So just a reaction.
Yeah, well, and that is the heart of where that kind of that idea of embodiment comes in, or particularly positive embodiment is what they often call it in the research, which is the lived experience of being in our body in a way that allows us to befriend ourselves and feel that deeper connection and safety and security by being in this body right now, which I think just about everyone who has worked with people with addiction or people who have struggled with addiction themselves would resonate with what you just said, of that idea of feeling like your body's betrayed you, or that it's adversarial, that your body is trying to force you to do things that aren't good for you. And that can be very disconnecting. It can be really disorienting when that's happening. And so yoga, again, as this means, when we think of yoga as union, which is again what the Sanskrit word means, union, that it brings us back to ourselves, brings us back. And that union, that bringing us back to ourselves, is what allows us to kind of open up to the world too.
And then talk about how challenging it can be. I mean, Kurt, I actually have done periodically yoga in spells, sometimes for quite intensely. And the yoga instructors will often warn the rooms that certain poses can cause emotional releases and even bring trauma back to the surface. I'm probably not saying it correctly, but that process of sort of reestablishing your connection with your body can be challenging in a lot of ways. Talk about the kinds of challenges people might feel.
Yes, absolutely. And that is one thing that I will often say, particularly in classes that are designed to be trauma sensitive or trauma informed, is that our emotions are physical. They live inside of us. They live in the tissues of our body. And so sometimes when we move our body, those emotions and those memories or feelings can come out. And sometimes we know exactly why and what it is that we're feeling and why we feel it. And sometimes it makes no cognitive sense, but it's still there. And what yoga does is it gives a container for us, a safe container for us to explore that, so that if things come out to the surface, that can be healing. It might not be pleasant, but it can be a form of healing. There's a very famous seminal book by Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score, that when trauma happens, we don't always know it cognitively or intellectually, but our body remembers these things. And so yoga is one means that our body can kind of remember and heal in a safe container. Again, as long as you can create that safe container where someone can feel something and then know that they have the support around them to support whatever it is that comes up.
Yeah, there's something in the chat, Catherine, if you wanted to kind of read that.
Yeah, let me look here.
Actually, really nice little statement. So
one thing that I always appreciated that our instructors did at the end of class, they would tell you to think about things that were difficult or causing you stress, and then tell you to leave those things in the classroom and walk out lighter. It was something to the tune of that. But that always helped me a lot. You know, you felt like you could just leave it there and move on with your day.
Yeah, just like sweat it out onto the mat, or like breathe it out, exhale out what you don't need and leave it. Yeah. Oh, I'm just seeing this comment in the chat, which is so powerful, about someone just sharing their personal experience about connecting with their inner self with yoga and meditation, helping them to see deeper into what is not healthy for them in their personal relationships, including the relationship with themselves, going back to childhood. That is powerful. That is really powerful. Whoever is that, Becca Colby? Thank you for sharing that. That's really.
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting because I do think that there's, everybody's kind of got their place. And I think about, I've been running for 40 some years, and, that's kind of where I solve the problems in my mind and think about things. And I wouldn't say meditate, but it's really, everybody kind of finds that spot. I've often wished I think I'm like a lot of people who don't do yoga. You say, I don't have time for that, right? Isn't that what you hear? People say, oh, I don't have time for yoga.
Yeah.
But it's, I do think, especially with some of the patients that we've seen and that have done yoga, I mean, clearly they enjoy it. I think often they stop, which I think mostly it's because there's just not that support when they get back from treatment, or they don't know where to go, or they can't afford it. And I do think cost is an issue if you want to be a part of a group, right?
Absolutely.
So more access would be great. So.
Thanks for sharing your YouTube channel. I think that's something that can be used with patients.
Yeah, that was the point behind it. So
awesome.
All right. Anything else before we let Catherine go? That was a fabulous talk. I think we knew everybody'd appreciate it, so we were happy to have you on. All right. Well, we'll let everybody get back to work a few minutes early. And Catherine, if you have other subjects related to this that you'd ever want to come back and share, we'd love to have you back. And thanks again for a great talk.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you all. And thanks everyone for being here and engaging. Someone's asking, I just see one more question in the chat about familiar with John Upledger. And I would say, yes, I'm also a craniosacral therapist. And so I've done a lot of training with the Upledger Institute. So I'll put my email in the chat if anyone is interested and has questions or engaging with more of this. I'm the only Catherine Justice at HCMC, so it makes me easier to find it if people are part of that system. But
all right.
My email there.
All right, everybody. Again, thanks for coming. Next week we have Cam Weaver, and he's tons of fun. So make sure that you come back in a week. Again, thank you, Catherine, so much.